This is your very, very basic refrigeration system PowerPoint. Every week on Wednesday, we'll go through the basic refrigeration system, taking you from the very, very basic all the way up to the basic refrigeration a little bit more in detail. This first item on the screen is your compressor. This compressor is in the outside condensing unit. It takes a low pressure, low temperature vapor and turns it into a high pressure, high temperature vapor. This is your outside condensing coil. This takes a high temperature, high pressure vapor and changes it into a lower temperature, high pressure liquid. Both these items are located in the outside system, which is called a condensing unit. The next part we're going to talk about is an evaporative coil. This evaporative coil takes a low pressure, low temperature liquid and turns it into a higher temperature, low pressure vapor. But to do that, it needs the assistance of a metering device. The upper metering device looks like a T with a coil on it. It's a TXV. It's a thermal expansion valve. The bottom one is a fixed metering device. It has a piston inside it that meters the amount of refrigerant. Both of these items go into the inside air handler, which is in your closet, in your attic, or in your garage usually. Here is your second slide, the very, very basic refrigeration system with refrigerant lines. The compressor takes the high pressure, high temperature vapor to the condensing coil by way of this refrigerant line that's in red with a black dotted arrow. And as the refrigerant passes through the condensing coil, it takes the high pressure, high temperature vapor and turns it into a high pressure, high temperature liquid. That red dotted arrow demonstrates the refrigerant line going to the thermal expansion valve. Once the high pressure, high temperature liquid goes through the valve, it changes its state into a low temperature, low pressure liquid as it sends it to the evaporative coil. The evaporative coil takes the low pressure, low temperature liquid and changes it into a low pressure, low temperature vapor and sends it back the blue dotted line to the compressor to start the cycle all over again. Our third slide in the very, very basic refrigeration system shows the difference between the high side and the low side of the system. The left-hand side, where the compressor and condensing coil is, that's the outside unit in air conditioning, and that's considered the high side. It's always high pressure and high temperature created by these two items. The right side is the low side of the system. This is the indoor system in air conditioning. The evap coil and the thermal expansion valve create the low side of the system. Now on slide 4, the very, very basic refrigeration system, the refrigeration cycle is running counterclockwise from the compressor to the condenser to the metering device to the evap coil and back to the compressor. Coming out of the compressor, we're a high pressure vapor. Coming out of the condensing unit, we're a high pressure liquid. Coming out of the metering device, we're a low pressure liquid. Coming out of the evap coil, we're a low pressure vapor. Here we have the very, very basic refrigeration system with directional refrigerant lines. On the bottom left-hand side of the screen, you'll see the compressor. The lines coming out of the compressor are the high pressure, high temperature line. That's called the discharge line. When it leaves the condensing coil, it changes its name. It's a high pressure, high temperature liquid, but now it's called the liquid line. Coming out of the expansion valve, the low pressure, low temperature liquid is the expansion line, or the distribution line. And then coming out of the evaporative coil, going back to the compressor, it's the suction line. The reciprocating compressor has cylinders and pistons. The cylinder on the left-hand side is showing the piston moving down, creates a sucking action, sucking the low pressure, low temperature vapor into the compressor cylinder. As the compressor motor pushes the piston up on the right-hand side, it compresses the refrigerant, the low pressure, low temperature gas into a high temperature, high pressure gas, creating heat and pressure. The compressor sends high pressure, high temperature Freon gas to the condensing coil. As it passes through the coil from the top to the bottom, the air outside changes the state into a liquid by condensing the vapor. And it leaves the bottom of the condensing coil as a high pressure, slightly cooler liquid. Here's what is your first metering device, and probably one of the oldest systems. The small little thin tubes that meter the amount of refrigerant that goes to each coil inside this bank of coils. The second type of metering device is a piston type. It's the little small tube that goes inside the nut in the center of that coil. And that's how it meters the amount of Freon going through. And the third kind is probably the most common now, and the most efficient, is the TXV valve at the bottom. Again, here are the two most common metering devices: the piston type on the top left, and the metering device, that's a TXV, thermal expansion valve, on the bottom right. On the piston type, you can change the size of the pistons depending on the size of the unit. So if you're putting in a 3-ton, it would have a different size piston than if you're putting a 2-ton. And most units come with a piston in a little package on the condensing unit to make sure you match the system inside. The red line is the liquid line from the condensing coil going to the metering device. It goes into the small metering device tube and goes down to the piston metering device that you see in blue dashed line. And then it goes through the 4 or 6 distribution tubes at the end of the metering device and runs through the coil. It goes in the bottom as a liquid, partial gas, and as it raises up, runs through the coil, the heat in the air changes it and actually boils off the liquid into a gas, and then comes out the top manifold into the suction line towards the compressor.